Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark, and we are in Esther chapter 2. We're going to be looking at verses 21 to 23. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, before we begin verses 21 to 23, like Philip, in Acts chapter 8, verses 26 to 40, God knows how to put us in just the right place at just the right time to meet the eunuch on the way back to Ethiopia. God placed Mordecai at that gate at that specific time to hear their plan. And this is just another domino that falls in God's overall plan to save the Jews. Right? We read this portion of scripture and we say, okay, yeah, Mordecai was at the gate. Well, when we see the whole picture of the book of Esther, we realize that it was God that moved Mordecai to be at that gate at that specific time to hear the plot of these two men. Now, do you believe that God has put you in just the right place to be a help for someone? Has there been times in your life when you've said to yourself, or you've mentioned to somebody, boy, I went over to visit so-and-so and I got there just in time, right? Just in time for prayer, or just in time to help them with this thing, or just when I arrived, this thing happened, right? And God has a way of putting us in places where we can be a help to someone. Or, like while I was there, I wasn't planning on going to the store today, but while I was there, this thing happened, right? Or you decide to go to one store instead of another, and something happens at that store that you go to, or you meet someone, right? Someone confides in you and they need prayer or whatever. And God has a way of putting us in places at the right time through his providence in order to be a blessing and a help to people, or to be a help to us. Maybe we're in need. Maybe we're the ones that need the prayer. Maybe we're the ones that need the words of encouragement. And he puts us there because someone is already there waiting for us to come, right? God planted this other person, and they're there for us. Verse 21 says, in those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. Now, it's not exactly known why they were angry, although, trust me, among commentators, there's plenty of speculation as to why they were angry. So, it says here, the names of the men were Bigthan and Teresh. Now, it's believed that both of these men were eunuchs, and that they kept the door of the king's sleeping room. Again, how they figured it out, I don't know. But it's believed that they kept the door of the king's, basically his bedroom. Now, it's possible that Bigthan is the same as chapter 1, verse 10, Bizthan. All right, in chapter 1, verse 10 of Esther, you have one of the seven chamberlains is Bizthan. And it's possible that this is the same person. It's spelled differently, but it could be the same person, Bigthan. Now, conspiracies in Persia were common. And King Ahasuerus he really was ultimately murdered. But he was murdered by, I'm going to give you these names here if I can pronounce them right, by Artabanu, and Artabanu was the captain of the king's guard, and also another person, his name was Aspamitra, and who was the chamberlain. He was a chamberlain and a eunuch. So these two men, Arbatanu and Aspamitra, these two men ultimately did come in and kill King Ahasuerus years later. So again, conspiracies and plots against the king were common. This one here, as we see in Esther 2, Mordecai was able to hear about it and to tell Esther about it. But eventually one conspiracy did take place and they did kill the king. When it says that they sought to lay hands on the king, it means they meant to do violence, okay, to kill him, because the same phrase is used in chapter 3 and verse 6. All right, chapter 3 and verse 6. We're going to see that in a couple lessons here with Haman. Now, verse 22 says, and the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And then Esther, she certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. Now, it says here, in Mordecai's name. But again, she still didn't reveal her relationship to Mordecai, to the king. She basically went to the king and said, this is what this Mordecai said. And then they checked it out and they realized it was true. So, but she didn't reveal who Mordecai was to her. And then it says, Esther told the king. And by Esther telling the king of this conspiracy, it would cause her to have a greater influence in the king's eyes. And it would help her greatly when she had to go before the king on the Jews' behalf. So you may say, well, Esther was the queen. I mean, she should already have, prominence in his eyes. Well, she did. But remember, the king had how many? The king had many wives, many concubines. So the queen being the queen means basically she's the better of all the rest, if you know what I mean. She's a little higher than the rest. But so I guess in a sense it would be kind of like, even though you're the queen, you are a little higher than the other than the other concubines and the other wives, but you're not so high that the king would not maybe reject you at some time and choose another one of the other concubines to spend the night with, right? So, but by her giving the king this information, it's in a sense, it would give her a higher position in the king's heart, more prestige in the king's heart as to Esther. And it would benefit her. It's going to benefit her in the future when she needs, again, the providence of God. That's what this whole book on Esther is about. It's about the providence of God. And you're seeing it in all these little details. Verse 23, and when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out, therefore, they were both hanged on a tree. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. So it says they were hanged on a tree. And actually, it means that they were crucified or that they were impaled on a tree. This is the ordinary punishment for the offense in Persia. So for this offense, they weren't hanged, as we know, with a rope. No, they were hanged by crucifixion or by being impaled on a tree. Then it says it was written in the book of the king, written in the book of the king, right? Now, like the Lamb's book of life in Revelation 21, verse 27, and in the book of Malachi, chapter 3 and verse 16, the book of remembrance, these things are written that there are things written in them now so that we will get our reward later at a specific time in the future. So the king had a book. Verse 23 says, right? And it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. Right? And like the king had a book, so also God has books. He has the Lamb's book of life. He has the book of remembrance. And things are written in those books. And we'll get rewarded for the things that are written in those books. And you know, this would have been a perfect excuse for Mordecai to feel disrespected. Well, I mean, I told Esther, and Esther, she told the king, and the king wrote it down, and my name is in the book. I mean, I helped save the king's life, right? And, well, you know, where's my reward? And he didn't get reward right away. Again, like all of us, Mordecai would have a good reason to feel disrespected by the king, right? See if I do anything good for the king anymore, right? Most people would immediately be offended. They'd be offended that the king didn't reward them in some way, right? But if we die to our own selfish, sinful desires and stop focusing our lives on ourselves and just trust God and give him the glory, then we will see the plan of God unfold over time. Our impatience can sometimes stand in the way. Where's my reward? I want it now, right? Well, maybe you will get it here on earth, but you'll get it in God's time. Get your eyes and your heart off of what you think God owes you, right? God owes me this. Be patient and let God promote you in his time. As here in Esther, there may be a more important reason as to why God is holding back your reward or your promotion at work, right? Or your acknowledgement of a job well done. I did this for my company and I never got a pat on the back, right? Well, maybe because it's coming in God's time, right? Seek God's plan and God's will and seek God's timing for your life and stop getting in God's way. Your reward will come, but don't get in the way. So what if you have to wait until you get to heaven to hear God say, well done, thou good and faithful servant? Is it really that important that you hear that on earth? Is it really that important that you hear God say, well done, thou good and faithful servant, here on earth? Wouldn't you rather hear it in heaven? Wouldn't you rather get your rewards in heaven? I mean, the rewards that we get here on earth, they're just temporal, right? The blessings we get here are just temporal. But wouldn't you rather that God reward you in his time? Maybe his time will have a much better benefit for other people. You know, we get all worked up and we want God you owe me, God. I did this for you, right? I've been a servant for 37 years, and right? And God wants to reward us, but let it be in his time, because it'll have a benefit for other people also. Right? We're going to start chapter 3 next lesson. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.